Last Pint Productions presents the new way.
No, that you're way too high. Like that doesn't sound right. Like go. We do this with movie. Do the movie voice.
Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast with Ben and Matt.
I want Matt and Ben. Like it's always Ben and Matt. Why does it always have to be
I'm not
Ben
sure if that
before
phonetically.
Matt?
That phonetically doesn't sound correct.
Phonetically is not even the right word. Why do you have the worst word choice? Phonetically, that doesn't make any sense.
It does. Actually,
no, it doesn't. There is no phonics involved in Matt and Ben versus Ben and Matt. Well, no, it doesn't. There's no fucking.
But
difference.
There's an alphabetical order. To it.
I'm gonna,
okay.
Here we go. All right, I have a better idea.
All right.
Last Pint Productions presents pow pow boom explosions, the New Way podcast with Ben and Matt. You are gonna do this. Yes, I am gonna do this. For the first time, I'm thinking clearly. You aren't thinking clearly. Yes, it's the New Way with Ben. It's getting cliched, isn't it? It's too much.
Well, I think we should make it clear that there's going to be adult content in there.
There's going to be titties. Big old titties. This good? Alright, you rewrite it so it sounds better. But the idea is that we want to say there are titties.
Okay. The New Way podcast contains adult content like titties.
Okay, I like this.
And
good.
Naughty language.
Yes.
And Dirty Sanchez. I have
nailed it. Yes.
Got it.
Oh, well done.
I was so close.
Listener discretion.
Advice.
Is advised. Do it again.
Is it
listener
really?
Discretion.
Is it? Wait. Is it advised or is it?
Listener discretion.
Advised or is
just
advised?
Just say is advised. Listener discretion.
Is advised.
Yes.
That's not right.
No. Okay.
So you were in Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah?
Were you in the shit?
Yeah, I was in shit.
You know when you hear girls saying, like, I was so shit-faced last night, I shouldn't have fucked that guy. We could be that mistake.
God help you if you use voiceover in your work, my friends. God help you.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me and naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Oh, hey, good evening or morning or afternoon, depending on when you are listening to this edition of The New Way with Ben and Matt. I am Matt.
And I'm Ben, and it's actually me here today. There might be some upcoming episodes or some intermittent episodes where you're going to be hearing from other people besides me. That's not really by my choice.
We're doing it to get ahead. I kind of pushed this one just it's fitting since today we're going to be talking about Last Pint Productions.
Yeah, pretty much.
And kind of giving you guys a behind the curtain peek at what we do or don't do here at Last Pint.
What we haven't done.
What we haven't been able to do. And that was kind of the reason that, Ben's extremely busy with twins and work, and I have far less things to be busy with, but I am also busy. And so we're trying to actually...
It's pretty much like everything that you could potentially come up with, you'd be like, oh, I got this assignment at work.
Nothing, I can't, that's why I didn't even say today. I'm like, exactly, it doesn't matter.
But rest assured that Matt is very busy. It's just, I will always hold the trump card of being like...
the busiest person in the room, bar none.
I have not gotten more than 3.5 hours of sleep since.
I can imagine. I don't know. And on top of that, Ben went and played a 3-hour set at the living room on Sunday night to put some money in the old diaper fund for diaper fund. Was that what it was? Or
diaper money?
Diaper money.
Diaper
the
money.
Band name ever. But yeah, So I kind of proposed to Ben. I said, "Listen, I've got a trip coming up this weekend to Halloween Horror Nights with my brother. Night before, I'm going to have the guys over to the house since I'm taking Friday after work, and we're going to do another podcast. Then I'm going to do one in Orlando with my brother, all about theme parks. If you're a theme park fan or aficionado, definitely you want to listen to that one. So I figured we kind of get 3 or 4 done over the course of a week so that Ben and I could actually spend most of October writing.
Catching back up, basically, with the stuff that we've largely ignored. Well, really since like I found out we were pregnant almost. I mean, it's really this year has been a relative wash so far. As far, I mean, the funny thing is we've. And I'm sure we'll kind of circle back around to it, but I feel like our major accomplishments on the like other side, like non-podcast side of Last Pint Productions things this year, is us completely reimagining our concept for something twice.
Yes.
like really trying, kind of approaching everything and like adding completely new elements or changing complete plot points around all of that sort of stuff. So basically, we did some rewrite. You know what? I listened to like how long it takes movies or TV shows to be put together and what goes on in the writing stage. We're not completely outside of the realm of what other people who are doing nothing but writing tend to, you know. Oh no, I know that. I don't presume to.
In defense of Last Pint Production, how dare you attack us when we're down?
I wouldn't say down.
We're a man down. The man down.
Where this year has been, but obviously, like my schedule is going to eventually. You know, outside of work, at least, is eventually going to loosen back up
in 18
again.
years.
In 18 years. No, I mean, but you know, it's really so hands-on and intensive over the course of the first 6 months more than any other time of their lives. But also, I've got like my mother's coming to town for a month, which is a nice time. You know, so she's going to be here for the majority of October, which allows me to spend time either writing or hanging out with Matt. Or sleeping, where I won't feel bad because that doesn't automatically mean my wife is taking care of both of the kids, which is just a huge... I mean, she's a fucking champion that she's, you know, kept her marbles this long.
She has won awards for fucking. She is. It's true. Blue ribbons. A fucking champion.
Nah, I get it.
A champion
get
of the art... did I ruin your...
No, I was just wondering who gave these awards. Like,
you don't want to meet these people. They are bad people.
You personally know all of them.
I do. It's pretty creepy. But yeah, so we kind of figured, since some of you may or may not be interested in exactly why you're listening to us, that's kind of what I came up with when I was thinking about what we would talk about, is that this is probably the best example of what in the hell we are. You know, like, I have a feeling there's got to be at least one or two strangers that have stumbled upon this, and they've got to be like, why? What qualifies these two jagoffs to sit and rip apart Michael Bay, who this random stranger happens to love, and wants to know what the hell?
Well, the short answer to that question is nothing. We are not qualified, but we're going to do it anyway. I mean, I know that what we did is when we first started the podcast, I mean, our very first introductory podcast, is we explained how, you know, which we can briefly revisit, but our meeting and the synthesis of us becoming actual, what you would consider writing partners, to whatever extent you want to call that. So we've talked about that, but really the process and really the different things that we've worked on, we didn't really get into that. Besides just kind of talking about how we started out with Dream Writers.
Yeah, we didn't really even talk about Dream Writers, so that's a good place. I mean, that's really sort of the birth of this.
So really, I think this is going to be the fun thing where we can talk about the ideas that we've had. We can talk about how good and or bad they may be or may have been, and where we've gone essentially with each of those ideas, or what plans we could potentially have as far as... I mean, honestly, it's one of those things where I feel like even as we've finished, the only thing that we've really fleshed out and what you would quote-unquote say finished, I mean, there's no real finishing for any sort of thing like that. We were already sort of balls deep into other stuff, so... This
is true, yeah. So to very briefly recap the story, I dated Ben's ex-fiancée. It turned out we both frequented this same dive bar.
You know she's engaged?
No.
Yeah. So Mazel Tov, Christy.
Mazel Tov.
Yeah.
I have I have no response to
no,
this.
I actually just found out a couple of weeks ago. But anyways, no, congrats. Like I said, there's absolutely no ill will. It's if
No,
anything,
not at all.
There's only good things and friendship there. The individual does not live in close proximity to us anymore. So
That was the most clinical description. The individual in question is no longer residing in the Boynton Beach, Delray Beach area.
what I mean by
We
that,
believe her whereabouts to be somewhere in Connecticut.
that was a preface to us being like, this isn't somebody who we're talking to like every day, you know. So it's not like so it's not weird that you didn't know that, because I didn't know that until like I was talking with Paul like 2 weeks
The
ago.
threat has been contained to the northeast quadrant of the United States.
Dude, now you're getting into some dangerous territory here. We're not going to do that. On
Hysterical
the
to me. Okay. Anyway, so basically, the first thing Ben and I ever bonded over was the fact that we both loved this dive bar called O'Connor's, where we did our first pubcast from, where we will likely be doing our second pubcast sometime soon.
Maybe in a couple of weeks when Nick Santacroce's here.
I think so.
The funny thing is, I actually just found out today that I'm playing another show at the Living Room, but it's the early show. And that's, we're just going to cut so many
burps together on this podcast.
That's the intro.
It's amazing.
But anyways, or maybe we should just both dramatically read lines from like Dream Writers or from Hell Week or something, and then just cut those in, put some music under
You're
them.
killing me.
Anyways, what I was going to say is I'm actually playing an early show now on October 5th from like 5:30 to 7:30. So I'm like, when are we going to do the pubcast? Because if we do it any time, like we should definitely bring the microphone with us to record the drive back from the game.
I was thinking that actually, yes.
If you're gonna hear the incomparable and irreplaceable Nick Santacroce and myself drunk out of our fucking gourds.
Well, what I love actually is that I already had the image in my head of like driving you guys around like Miss Daisy with both of you in the back seat and me in like a cabbie outfit.
I'll
up in
probably
the
be
front.
asleep, dude.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that would be fantastic. So please stay tuned for some of the more uproarious. Well, and you should be getting one. The one that we're going to record tomorrow night is likely going to be another.
That will be
shit
fun.
show,
I'm really
but,
sad that I won't be there. And the funny thing is, I don't. I'm working. I'm traveling on Friday, but I'm not working on Friday either. But obviously, I've got my main responsibilities.
Hell yeah.
Family.
So Ben and I, we met at this bar. We both enjoyed the PBR Tall Boys. And we had talked a little bit at his Oscar party about cinematography. What do you...
I was just thinking, I never really drink PBR Tall Boys at O'Connor's.
We did. Many times. Many times.
Because it was cheaper.
Yes.
My usual go-to is there, which is Harp.
Yeah.
Which is strange because I don't really drink Harp anywhere else, but for some reason at O'Connor's, I almost always drink Harp.
O'Connor's, I will say the other thing O'Connor's did for me was that was the first place I had Bell's Oberon, which they used to have on tap.
Oh, wow.
And then they replaced it with Torpedo, which is not a bad trade-off, but
Yeah,
I still
Torpedo's
missed
great
having the Bell's Oberon. But so we met up there, and one night we just got to talking over several beers till very, very late, talking about...
We closed the bar down lots of times.
Yeah, for sure. We were talking about kind of... I asked Ben what he had written in film. I basically, the first few times we hung out, I was kind of grilling Ben a lot about film school, because I was kind of fascinated. I didn't really know anyone that had gone through film school that could just sort of, like, pick their brain. They'll rack their own brain.
Well,
I'll pick it.
Yes.
Yeah. And so he had mentioned like a screenplay he had worked on, and I told him about this awful screenplay I wrote called Chiaroscuro, which is like not only the worst screenplay, but the worst named screenplay made. Like, who is going to go like through Netflix or Blockbuster and be like, oh, Chiaroscuro, isn't that the study of light and dark and art? I must watch this film. Because the only people that would get it would not enjoy the B movie that I wrote, filled with stock.
I mean, first off, just based off the name alone, nobody would sell that script.
Exactly. What's this churrascaria? Oh, this sounds like a great one. It must be about one of those Brazilian steakhouses.
Yeah.
And so then I told Ben about an idea I had many, many years ago. Who I originally fleshed it out with was Ken Posner. I kind of told him I had this idea of writing. Originally, it was going to be a movie about someone who writes dreams, and he was going to fall in love with the person whose dreams he was writing, and then he was going to get sent to Earth, and he wasn't going to look like himself, and he was going to have to prove who he was. It was just like this ridiculous love story, but with this kind of cool dream side.
I mean, really sounds a lot like
Not Heaven Can Wait. Heaven's Gate.
There's. It sounds like quite a few movies that came out in the 80s and early 90s.
Yes.
Like your Ghost or your what's the Albert Brooks
Defending Your Life very much is a huge influence.
But there are lots of films that came out around that period where I think you were in your adolescence.
Yeah.
And it probably had some sort of subliminal impact, or not so subliminal, or some sort of very.
I think so. Like, I mean, what was funny is when I first came up with it, it happened through a dream, and it was a dream when I was trying to write chiaroscuro. I couldn't figure out how to get the horrible thoughts in my head onto paper, and I spent like 2 months planning the screenplay, and I'd gotten the software, and I'd go sit at a fucking coffee shop every morning at 10 a.m. when all the moms would come in with their babies, and they had like a moms group that would meet there, and I would sit and listen to them and laugh at them talking about breastfeeding and whatever. And I had this dream of a writer's room where people were writing dreams, and one of the writers had writer's block. Like, he didn't know what to write. And I was like, that's a really cool idea. And then I think what happened is exactly what Ben's saying, is I fleshed together the remainder of the story. I'm like, okay, there's my hook, is that there's a company that writes dreams. You know, that's a good start. And then my hook was, let's make it one of these kind of star-crossed lovers finding themselves, but kind of make them earn it, you know, like make it count.
I thought you were going to say you woke up from this dream and you were like, I have the best line ever. I wish you'd be mad at me, because at least then I know you feel something.
A line so bad it wound up in Saw, and that was bar none the moment. I will say thank you to James Wan and Lee Winnell for one thing, which is I was watching Saw and thinking this is one of the worst like dialogue written screenplays I've ever seen, and then there was a piece of dialogue directly, I mean, literally word for word for a line that I wrote in chiaroscuro, and I was like, oh! So that's what it feels like to be the asshole complaining about stuff and then writing the exact same thing themselves. So I established early on with Ben that my biggest hurdle with writing was dialogue above and beyond. And Ben's response was, oh, that's like my specialty. I specialize in dialogue.
Well, and honestly,
and ladies.
that was one of the things I felt, and ironically, I never really explored until I left film school, funny enough. And this is just sort of a quick aside or background for me. My film school career was largely affected by the fact that I was in a touring rock band at the time, and really I didn't have any priorities at the time. I was kind of a jackass, and I really I didn't want to move to Hollywood. I knew that I didn't want to graduate school and move directly to LA. It just was not in the cards for me. It was just not what I wanted. I didn't know if I wanted to give the old college try actual playing music professionally or not. Through sort of this indecision, I think that I sort of shortchanged myself as far as my opportunities were concerned in film school, because I wrote my first. You do 4 films in film school, or 5 films. You do 4 of your own projects basically, and a documentary. Now, of those, 1 I did a music video just because I was interested in the concept or the challenge of trying to shoot a like 5-minute music video with 1,200 feet of film, because it's like with 1 camera setup, can't be done. I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it, and I'll make it look good, and it doesn't look great, but
fuck it, I'll do it live.
Right, and I'm talking about this is like a traditional style where you're actually seeing multiple cameras on the band. It's not like a single, one shot or any one of those sort of gimmicky sort of things. So I did that as almost sort of an exercise, as opposed to actually writing something that I had thrown around in my head, which is toy guns, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But in my thesis film, in your thesis, you're allowed to team up with somebody else, combine your cumulative footage, and also extend your running time. And that's how Nick and I ended up doing Michigan Left together. Now, Michigan Left, the concept was something that was born out of an idea for a short that I had. Just one scene. And everything sort of went from there. However, Nick and I wrote that together. Considering the story was my own, I still don't feel like the dialogue in that short is representative of the way I typically write. And that's no slight to Nick, because actually I revisit it now and I like the dialogue maybe even more than I did then. But it's
just not it doesn't have the
it doesn't have the which, I believe it or not, and I wish that I had some sort of definitive example of it, but the closest that I have to like Ben Wilson dialogue is something that is so completely far out, which is the Sanity short that I wrote, which is 4 minutes long, and is in this completely implausible. It's a comedy. It's in a completely implausible sort of circumstance, and it's very fast paced and typically different than the type of thing I would usually write, because it's way off the wall. But the cadence still is a little bit closer to what I would typically write. Anyways, I'm sorry about the aside, but no. I have no real example of the type of that's actually been shot. Of how I feel like I write now, or have written since 2005.
You write very Whedon-esque. I mean, that's usually what the stuff that I usually respond to the most in your writing is it's not quite. It's a little talkier.
It's a little talkier
than Whedon. A little more Sorkin-y than Whedon, but not really. It's never the good thing is that So Ben and I decided we were going to flesh out Dream Writers. I sent him the small amount of notes I had, and then we decided we were going to plan very much in advance before we even started writing any dialogue. So we
wanted to create the world first, which is a great. By the way, I don't know. Obviously, everybody's going to work on a different sort of level. Especially if you're collaborating, different types of collaboration work for different types of people. And we once wrote you wrote that great thing on Storyboard TV about our collaborative process and how it works for us. But one thing that I can absolutely say I think is crucial to somebody developing something original is before you write a single word of that, even if sometimes you want to write a teaser, or you want to write something to just get your mouth wet with it, but establish the world and the rules of the world that you exist in,
and the characters. And that's really, I will say, the biggest influence on kind of why we went in that direction, at least for me, was Lost. This was 2009, so Lost was still a couple years or a year away from ending. And Lost was clearly heading towards a different conclusion than anything that was set up in the first season, and that was, and there were other shows that were doing that were guilty of the same thing.
Right.
And I was really, really reticent to just be like, we have a great idea for a pilot. And we had all these questions. We had literally, I have a book. I still have it. It's in the back of my car right now. That's a list of questions. And I said, before we write anything, we have to be able to answer these questions. And we started to go through it. And there were ones that were tough, talking about an end game, going through, character arcs, who is going to make the biggest turn, who's going to stay kind of the same.
Right. And the conversations that stemmed from that type of dialogue, none of this was set in stone, because we altered our perspective on different characters and on really the overall arc, but it was nice to have this sort of template out there and being like, this is where we're going, this is who our characters are, this is what they mean, and right now, this is the goal that we're working towards. So, I mean, honestly, I felt like that's what allowed us to write fast.
For sure, yeah, and that was kind of the other side, is that you don't want to write a pilot that leaves all these questions and then come up with the answers and be like, boy, the pilot doesn't make any sense anymore because we're clearly going for something different in the end. So we're going to have to rewrite everything that's going on in the pilot. You're going to rewrite no matter what. You just don't want your rewrites to be because you didn't have any clear path set for what is this pilot setting in motion. Like the pilot has to set a series of events in motion. They're eventually going to have some sort of logical conclusion. If you don't have that when you're writing the pilot, it's not good, and it's also just more fun for a view. I'm a TV geek. I absorb these shows, and there's nothing better. It's why I still, and Ben's probably going to be sick for the next month of hearing me talk about Breaking Bad. But it's one of the things I like about Breaking Bad, even though they didn't have the fine points laid out in the beginning. But Vince Gilligan had the clear concept in his head, which was Mr. Chips turns into Scarface. And it's set up in the pilot in one scene in the classroom where Walt is talking about chemistry is a study of time and change. And that's it. That is the entire show encapsulated in one. That's your log line, really. I mean, that's exactly what you're looking for. And they set that out very clearly in that pilot episode. And all of those things, you watch the pilot going into the final season right now, and there's no disconnect in what they set out to do.
Well, the one thing that's great about Breaking Bad, and obviously, like, Matt is like the uber Breaking Bad fan, and I appreciate it greatly. The thing that there are lots of shows that I think do a very good job of laying out where they're going to end. I think a lot of shows that are successful flounder in the middle stuff.
Yeah.
They have options, and then they realize that they're things that could have been complete asides or the type of things that you would throw away in a normal writers meeting because you're like, I've only got one season to tell this story.
Yeah.
You end up embracing it because you're like, shit, I got time to fill. Which is like one of my biggest problems with like How I Met Your Mother. Like, I love the show How I Met Your Mother, and the first 2 seasons are arguably the best, I think, television sitcom in the past. I think it's better than Seinfeld. But it became not as good as Seinfeld because eventually they fell back on the fact like, well, we know where we're going, but hey, we have a hit show, so it might take us 9 seasons to get there.
Let's tread water and see
it might take us 9 seasons to get there, so we're literally going to wait until these characters who start out at 27, we're going to wait until they're 37 before we actually get anywhere.
Yeah.
And so you end up with seasons where they're basically just, there's no reason for those seasons to exist, which is like why Seinfeld would be a better show is because
there is no goal.
There is no goal, and the charisma of the leads, when they fall back on the jokes, it ends up being funnier than something like
that was kind of the genius with Seinfeld when they obviously it was never a show about nothing, but the good thing that they had that was not about nothing. The characters were about nothing. Seinfeld could go on in perpetuity because none of those characters were ever expected to grow, were ever expected to change, were ever expected to be anything but the archetypes they were when they started. And they maybe get a little crazier. But with Dreamwriters, the cool thing that we did, and again, these are just our recommendations for people who have not sold a pilot to anyone, but it worked for us, I think, and I know I was supremely happy with the final product. But for Ben to write the dialogue, I wrote out these character profiles on sheets, and there was I put down what the person's name was, and I read into all of this like etymology about what the name means and what the backstory was.
You went deep.
The reason why I did it, I initially was just going to do it for the leads, like for Daniel and Lucy, kind of look at those two. But as I started to do them, I'm like, there's really interesting stories in these names that help really categorize, like, helped me fill in the arc for characters. Like Remy was very much based on what I read about that name, and Monty to an extent as well. They were names that really fit the arcs that we weren't sure about, but I'm like, this makes a lot of sense if we kind of play this. So I wrote that out, and then basically I wrote where they were before the pilot. So what were they doing before they're brought into this series of events? What happens to them during the pilot, and where are they heading after the pilot? Which a lot of that changed, but it was at least something that Ben could look at.
Exactly.
We put an actor photo on there and like made like a casting suggestion just for the voice. Which, by the way, I don't know if I told you this. The more and more I go back and read that, like I'll do it every couple of months. I'll go back and read the pilot. It was one of Ben's first casting choices for one of the roles of a character named Oswald, who's one of my favorite roles probably in the series. And Ben's first choice was Paul Giamatti, who I did not like
Right,
the
you
choice
didn't like it
at
at
all.
all,
I am like,
yeah.
no, it is wrong. It's wrong. And the more I read it, the more I'm like, yes, absolutely, Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, you're
I love
like
it.
3 or 4 years down the road here, and
Yeah.
you're finally starting to embrace
I'm
it.
finally getting there. So so then Ben sat down and wrote like 2 scenes. I think the open 3. Well, you wrote the opening dream first.
I wrote the opening dream and first, and then I wrote all of the first big office.
And then and then you wrote and where Ben won me over with the dialogue writing was with the character. We have a character called Leah, and we had kind of fleshed out. Leah is essentially Cassie from Battlestar Galactica, or what's the chick on Firefly, the redhead.
Yeah.
I forget her name.
Yeah, the one that everybody wants.
She's the tomboy that's still really hot and whatever, and is kind of a deep character. And and Ben's opening bit with her is that she's an engineer and she's dealing with all this like crazy stuff going on. And the lead character comes down and he's kind of following her through this engineering maze of crap. And she's working on things and there's like a pipe spraying.
That's a very Whedon. I mean, you compared some of the stuff I write to Whedon.
But it wasn't even just
much.
that. It was the reveal at the end, which was that she's kind of in love with this main character, or she likes him, and they're just having this like guy talk, back and forth. And then he says something to her that makes her smile, and Ben writes, it's evident when she smiles that the gunk is also clearly in her teeth. And it was this visual I had in my head. I'm like, okay, that's absolutely like nothing we ever discussed. It was just this small moment that totally nailed the character in a visual.
Well, it's the opening, it's the introduction to the character, and it's like she has this shit all over her face, and that's also in her teeth.
Yeah, and she can't, and she's so happy with this other person, even though she wants to impress him, she can't help but just like be happy to be around him and smile, warts and all.
Exactly.
And it was good shit. And so over 6 months we fleshed out the rest of that pilot. We'll try to like get through Dream Writers quicker here, even though that's kind of the bigger crux of what we wrote. And we eventually finished the pilot. I'd written out...
But see, here's the thing. We finished the pilot and did a reading, or like a fun roundtable reading with a bunch of friends of ours.
That's what I was going to talk about,
in like early December of 2009.
Right before Thanksgiving, remember, because I'd just gotten laid off.
It was right before
Thanksgiving.
It was in November.
November 19th.
I wrote the first word of that first scene of the pilot Dream Riders in August.
Yeah.
So we had created and revised a pilot in basically 2 months, and then gotten it together to read it.
And what's funny is, you know how long we planned before you wrote?
Like 2 months.
It was we started writing on June 15th or 16th. And so I saw in my notes, and then we...
Did I actually write something? Or
no, that's when we first said we're gonna make this show, and then we started doing the character, all that junk. So basically, it was 2 months of pre-planning and a couple months. It was basically 3 and 3. 3 months before, 3 months after, and we had a pilot, which feels amazing. And that's the one recommendation I would make. As much as Chiaroscuro is awful, it's an amazing feeling to finish like that final page. Like, I fucking made something that sort of makes sense from point A to point B to point C.
But here's the thing. We were very happy with it at that point and did a reading. It took 2 years. I mean, really, the October-November draft of the pilot of Dream Riders in 2011 is the one that I'm happy with.
Yes.
Because I went back and read... earlier this year, like one of the first drafts of Dream Riders, and I was like, Jesus Christ, what were we thinking?
We were a little off.
I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, like, obviously we're not talking from a perspective of being like, oh, well, we did this and this and this, and like we've had success with a property since then. But I just meant.
Well, what's funnier is that we entered that first draft of Dream Writers into a television pilot writing contest with Storyboard TV.
Right, exactly.
Where we made it readily into the second round.
We were semifinalists.
Yeah, we made it to the semifinals. We didn't make it to the final round, but they gave us kind of like an on the phone script critique, and we talked to this girl named I forget her name. I think it's Heather.
It was an H name.
Yeah, who I thought Ben was going to like leap through the phone and strangle because she, in defense of them, because we're going to kind of probably rip them a little bit here in a second, but they did give us some good notes. They talked definitely about raise the stakes, get to things quicker.
Sure, exactly.
Open up some
because
things.
I think one of the things that here's one of the pitfalls about creating such an intricate universe and knowing what's happening yourself in that universe is that in writing a pilot, we had these things of like, we would come up with an idea and be like, oh, that'd be great for episode 3.
We were holding off.
But we were
were
holding on it, thinking, oh, this is something we're going to eventually get to. Well, the audience, somebody who's reading a script for the first time doesn't know that there are these things in there. So we injected a lot more little things that were like, oh, well, this person's doing this, or this person's saying this, or thinking this, and it ended up making the pilot a lot more kinetic, as opposed to just feeling like an episode that was happening somewhere in the middle of a season where you had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, and we got some good notes. Well, the one big thing she had is she was very confused about where the dream writers were. Like, and we were like, well, they're not here or there, and that's kind of like we have this big reveal well down the road of, what... It's the same as like saying on Lost, like what is the island? Where is the island in the pilot episode?
Exactly.
That's one of the big questions. She's like, no, you need to give some sort of remembrance. Like, if they're on Mars, say they're on Mars. Ben's like, well, they're not on Mars. And so...
They're not on Mars.
They're not on Mars. And then she kept repeating, and once she had Mars in her head, that's all she could use as like her filler for... She's like, so when you're on Mars or wherever they are, and Ben keeps repeating, like, they're not on Mars. And like every time she would say it, you get angrier.
Well,
like, they're not on Mars.
The thing is, I was trying to effectively communicate because one thing that it is frustrating, and I understand this is an objective person reading a screenplay or reading a pilot. I'm trying to effectively communicate that these people are somewhere that's not supposed to be explained.
Yes,
like they are on another plane. Same thing as Lost. It's like the thing about Lost is the central question of the first season is where the fuck are they? So,
which, by the way, they never answer.
Which they never answer and they never really address. So that was my major issue, is that she kept on bringing up, well, like, where are they? Where are they? Okay, so they're on Mars. So what are they doing on Mars? And I'm just like, that's completely beside the point, because that's the central mystery of the show. But unlike something like Lost, that's something that's inherent in the show. We're not addressing it.
We know where we want them to be.
The stakes are raised because you have these people existing on the same, who are coexisting to some extent on different planes of reality, but we don't know where they are.
And that was always and it was the one good note she gave that, because what we originally our goal in the pilot was that you were supposed to kind of think this was this evil corporation next door. Like, this is just some office down the street from you that does dreams and blah, blah, blah. And eventually her point was made of, like, you need to establish that they're not, this isn't down the street, or this isn't on Earth, this is someplace else, which we did. And we wrote this kind of big reveal of something we had planned, like, 6 episodes into the first season.
Exactly.
And we wound up doing that. And so we entered the contest, we did that, we rewrote the pilot to a much, much better version and entered another contest, and then we re-entered Storyboard TV, another contest with them, and we did not make it even to the first round of finalists, which was surprising to us, to say the least.
The funny thing is the most disconcerting thing about that is, and I'm not going to rip them, because we had entered it once. We got what we needed out of that contest, and whatever. But we had a lot of very mixed opinion on the first time we entered a script, and some people had some really great things. Like, they were like, "Oh, you really need to break up some of this description because it's too flowery or too booky."
Yeah, we had a lot of technical fixes, which was good.
And this is, I'm somebody who was, I trained. I went to school for this sort of stuff, and I was like, you know what? They're right. I'm writing a book right now, basically. I should just be writing in directives. And so we fixed a lot of that. We ended up shortening the script by a good bit. We did lots of great things, and we coached ourselves through that first portion. But we had a lot of people who were like, and like comments and stuff like that, who would read our script and not be very enthusiastic about it. Whereas after we had done all of that, this very extensive revision, and re-entered it into the contest,
it was like nothing.
Well, the funny thing was we didn't get a bad comment on it.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, "This is really good."
It's interesting. I want to know. I want to know what's going on. Why does she call out his name?
Yeah,
They ask
exactly.
all the right questions.
Yes, exactly. And so,
By the way, we apologize. There's apparently a hurricane outside that started up while we were recording. So if you've noticed a decline in the quality of audio, it's because it's a storm out there.
it's because we live in Florida.
Yes.
And this is the way it goes down here. But no, I found it really interesting that we had these near unanimous praise the second time, and to Storyboard TV's credit, I'm happier that they picked us early on.
Yeah, because they helped shape.
Well, because they I think that they read and said, "Hey, this is a cool concept. These guys have stuff to work on."
Yeah.
We did the work, and then when we re-entered it, they're like, "Oh, these assholes are re-entering it. If we put it in the finals, then they were in the finals, last year."
And the best part about the thing that Storyboard has going forward is its comments. You get comments from other writers, other competitors. This is amazing. This is pretty fantastic. So we got a lot of good comments from other regular people reading the scripts. Plus the stuff. We got very good information, and we actually, after the first one, we started writing. All right, we're gonna take a quick pause
we're gonna
here.
stop this. We have to leave this in here, though.
I gotta make sure that this pauses and does not erase. But I think so. Welcome back. We are here once again. We took a little respite where Ben and I compared our best hotel bathtub stories.
Yes, drunken
hotel
bathtub
bathtubs.
stories, which we'll save for another podcast.
Yeah, we'll tell them. They're both very, very titillating and sad at the same time. So anyway, we for Dream Writers, we started to write a second episode, but we weren't really feeling it, and we said, we outlined a 3-season arc.
Almost an entire. I wrote
we got
the
pretty
entire
close.
episode.
Yeah, we were down to 10 pages, I think, left to go on it, somewhere around.
Yeah, we
there.
had 47 pages.
Yeah, we were very, very close, and it just wasn't. It wasn't really gelling. We were thinking about entering that, and we're like, I don't think that's a good idea. And we had written out. We envisioned the series, and this ties into something Ben said that's really important to me, which is we wrote in like a cable model. We were like, okay, we have a 3-season arc with 12 episodes each. Not a 24-episode season arc where you have to have a lot of filler. But we also discussed it, and we said, all right, this show we could pitch this to a network, and if we had to do like a Dream of the Week type idea, we could expand this pretty easily. But we wrote out 12 episodes for the first season with full synopses on each, and then we wrote out what was going to happen in the second season, what was going to happen in the third season, bring us to the conclusion. So we decided to write the season 1 finale, because every time we started changing things in that second episode and changing things in the arc, we kept getting to really cool stuff in the finale.
Yeah,
and we're
exactly.
like, God, I can't wait to write the finale. We just kept saying that, I can't wait to write the finale. And we're like, why don't you just fucking write the finale? So we completed our official full second episode, which was the finale, the season 1 finale, which kind of carried us into 2011. Because I remember looking over notes on that at the pool at my new place, and we finished that, and we were very happy with it, and then we went to LA, and it wasn't that we didn't hear what we wanted to hear in LA, but we kind of got that realization that breaking the TV is very difficult, and there's a process that you usually have to go through over many years. And we got a really good piece of advice, which was from Meredith, which is write a series of ebooks. Write your first season as a series of however many ebooks you want to make. 2 episodes to a book, maybe, or however you want to do it, and then pitch your show as an adaptation of something you've actually already written. And it was a really good idea. And we stepped back from it for a second. And we're like, okay, this is a project right now. If we really embark on this, it's going to consume us for another couple of years. And we had some other ideas that we wanted to flesh out.
Well, and we had talked pretty extensively about some of the other ideas that we had, and I mean, because even before we went to LA, we were thinking, okay, and that was really, I think, the first thing, that was the impetus of us being like, we've talked about, and like we've been drunk and talked about these other ideas that we've had. Let's just put them down on paper, just so we have a one-page, treatment of it, and so that we have this sort of in our back pocket. But
I forgot about that. That's right.
But we had never really done anything beyond that. Just we put them on. We wrote a treatment for like five.
Yeah, we wrote a few 30-minute comedies, and we wrote a couple of hour-longs, and then the one that we wound up tackling first that we had talked about, which was also precipitated by L.A. and the inimitable Nick Santa Croce, was an idea for a rock musical, and we talked about this in our on our movie musicals one. But Ben and I are both huge fans of musicals, and Ben has obviously a very extensive history with music professionally. And so we're like, and when we went out to LA, one of the ideas was an idea Nick had been bouncing around about, kind of a battle of the bands.
Well, it was a revisitation of, I think, what he perceived his college band experience, and he was in the band, of course, that I played in college. It was sort of an encapsulation of his experience, and then
Gadwell Lane, available on MySpace,
right? And then a revisitation of some of the elements of that, which were born into other things, and I think kind of took on a life of their own. But once again, I mean, even that project, I think that's an interesting project for you to mention, just because that's something that we have to basically do.
Yes. And we tackled it somewhat similarly in scope to Dreamwriters, which is kind of like let's get our arcs out, let's talk about the characters, let's get our musical numbers down, and that was basically, I mean, that's really where we're at right now. We did an outline of a 2-act structure that we liked.
Honestly, the reason why we haven't tackled that full on is because, I mean, putting on a musical is a big deal. I mean, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time and money and effort to do that. And so once we actually had our outline, and I even started writing some of the songs and started...
We have a couple of scenes.
And actually going through some of the scenes and doing some of the that sort of stuff, I was like, we're either going to have to get it really into this right now and try and put it on somewhere, or we need to kind of keep it where it is. And come back to it once we're like, okay, which is like, I figured, my whole point was that, like, what Battle of the Bands is for is when Matt turns 40 years old, is that all of a sudden we're going to be like, all right, we're going to put on a musical this year.
Yeah.
and we're going to flesh it out in 2 or 3 months, and that's all we're going to work on. We're going to work on it tirelessly, like 2 or 3 nights a week. We're going to cast it, we're going to get a thing together, and we're going to put it on for 3 weeks.
And with the subject matter that actually makes a lot of sense to revisit it at that point in our lives as well.
And that's really sort of what that exists at. As for me.
Yeah.
Now, for Nick, it's something a little bit different, I know. But as we continued working on it, I think that's what became.
What I love about that show, and what really actually like sold me on the idea, was really kind of, Nick's passion for it. And what I like is we set up a 2-act structure that's a little different than a few shows have done similar type things, where your first act and your second act are very separate or different types of stories. And one of kind of the reality of the future, and one the optimism of the past. And what I like is that I think Nick right now is first act. Nick wants to, I think, kind of rewrite, or at least like cathartically accept his band experience in college for the fantasy versus the reality. And then that second act is going to be the hard one, but it's going to be interesting for all of us to kind of come back to that in a while and do it. But for me, and I think this was, I believe I remember, this is how I remember the events, is Ben and I were working on Battle of the Bands. We were on board. I mean, we were working readily on it. And then a movie came out that both of us went to go see an early screening of, which was Cabin in the Woods. And Cabin in the Woods came out, and I, more so even I think than Ben, I couldn't get it out of my head. Like
Well, we saw it together. We went and saw
the
the
early,
screening.
the advanced screening, and I fell in love 100% with the movie. And I just kept playing it over and over in my head, and what I kept playing was I loved the mashup. I love a good mashup. Like when they're done right, if it's horror comedy or horror high concept, which is really Cabin in the Woods is not really a horror comedy. It's more horror concept, sci-fi or mystery maybe.
Yeah.
I eat that shit up, and I was like, I want to write the next good like mashup of things. And so we were sitting at Benny's, and I was like, let's just start throwing out concepts to one another, which is usually how we start. That's another good writer's note for us. Ben and I, every concept that Ben and I have written starts out with, I have this idea, it's not very good, I don't even want to say it. And the other one's like, just say it. And you're like, no, I don't want to talk about it. You're like, just say it. And the idea comes out, and then it gets completely reshaped, and that seed grows into,
And that doesn't happen with like just an initial concept. That happens with a line. That can happen with a moment that happens in a scene somewhere. But it would be like we'll be discussing a scene that we wrote and any of the various things that we've worked on. And I'll say, because one thing that we haven't talked about is we've written a lot of stuff in between there. I've done lots of shorts. We've entered other competitions. We've done all sorts of stuff like that. But it'll be sometimes just writing, and one line or something like that will come about, and I'll be like, I want to say it, but I can't because it's so dumb.
Yeah.
And it's
we always go through, and we're still like bashful about that kind of shit. And because we're always sure the other one's going to be like, and by the way, it doesn't mean that everyone sticks. For every one that works, there are 9 that the other one says.
We give each other
like, nah.
enough shit.
Usually Ben more so to me, which is good, and it's why I keep trying them. Is that Ben? I'll make like 10 line suggestions. And, by the way, this is a part of the writing we didn't quite touch upon. For the most part, how Ben and I work is that Ben writes dialogue. We both do the setup. We kind of like come up with the work. I'll try to like handle it.
What'll happen? I think the easiest way to put it is that I'll write it.
Yes.
Then you reword.
I do. Yeah, I do edits.
You reword it and make suggestions. The thing is you reword most if not all of the descriptions and things along those lines, and then you make suggestions about the dialogue, and you write it.
Or I'll write like a lot of times I'll just write like awesome. Like if Ben's on the right track with something, it's how I learned to write in high school with essays. I had a really good teacher that used to write in the margins, except that he wouldn't write full things. He'd write like symbols. Like if you wrote a shovel, that meant you were burying yourself and saying a bunch of shit that didn't make sense. Or I'd write a train with going away from the tracks. You were getting off point. Right. So that's kind of how I learned to edit, and so I would give those to Ben. The rule we had was kind of the rule of 3. If I made a suggestion 3 times, and it came back to me from Ben 3 times, and a change wasn't made, I understood that to be that Ben did not agree with the suggestion, and that he had the better way to talk, which was almost always right. And I can't even think of a moment where it wasn't. And it was good. Like, and sometimes I give a suggestion and it would come back, and that that would be done. And so we work very well with one another. In that is that there's very much the ego check at the door. Like neither one of us is competing. We're usually just trying to see how do we tell the story the best, and we'll argue it. We'll sit and debate for an hour over a certain thing. But we always, at the end, we both agree on the right way to go.
And the thing is, and the funny part about the agreements that happen as writers is sometimes we don't even necessarily concede our points.
Yeah.
We just agree about how to move forward. Like, we're like, okay, well, if we can't do this, or if we don't want to go on so far on this side, if we don't want to do this and seem like it's to this way, how are we going to arrive at this place? And then that's what the discussion becomes, is like, okay, well, this is too cliched, and this is a little bit too far-fetched. Where can we find some sort of happy medium? And that's where we end up usually writing our best stuff, I think.
Yeah, and we absolutely make concessions on things. And there's never, like, any hard feelings. And sometimes, especially if you're writing with someone else, you're invariably going to come to a point where both of you are right, essentially. You both just have taken the story in a different direction, or you've interpreted a character differently.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you kind of say, all right, well, you try to figure out what's going to sell for the audience the best. And a lot of times, it's not going to be your own idea. Like, a lot of times, you're going to sit there and you go, all right, your idea makes much more sense as far as to make this a more palatable experience for the viewer or the reader or whoever. Right. And you're like, okay, it sucks. I lost. Like, I lost this week's fantasy football. I just didn't. I thought this was a good choice, and I still think it was a good choice, but it didn't pan out, so whatever, go and take your lumps. So that's when Ben and I started on our most recent project, which is one that's called Hell Week. And that was really kind of born out of the mashup, and it was a classic Ben and Matt moment of, we tried like 7 other concepts before that. We both were very close.
No, here's the thing. We were just talking about, we hadn't decided to write anything.
Yeah.
We were just throwing shit out for fun.
For mashups. Like, we were like, let's do something. And we were both very sold, actually, on an idea of like an ex-CIA agent or like someone with or a hitman out in the sticks, like stuck in a like essentially like Doc Hollywood if instead of a doctor he was a hitman, almost very much that Ice. It's the Harold Ramis movie with the
Ice Harvest.
The Ice Harvest, yeah. Kind of, except that we wanted to acquire, and we were like picturing it in the middle of Florida, and we were getting close to that concept. And I was like, I still want to. I'm like, I want to mix up like a fantasy idea with a comedy idea. And Ben's like, well, I have this idea, but I think it's dumb. And after 20 minutes of getting Ben to eventually tell the idea, so his original concept was The Hangover meets Lord of the Rings. Like, what if we did The Hangover, except that when they woke up in the morning, they were in like in Mordor or like this thing? And I was like, it's close. I'm like, I liked it instantly. I'm like, it's close, but I don't know. And before all of this, I had given a book to Ben. It's a modernization of Dante's Inferno, also called Inferno.
It's called Inferno
by Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle.
Which is, by the way, if you want a great read, not just because it's a good book, but if you ever want to read a book that is, I've read 2 books since then that feel the same way. That are science fiction books that read now like they were written yesterday.
And this
which is
from,
hard.
Yeah.
Science fiction written in the 70s.
Yes.
That reads like it could have been written today.
And it's also a quick read. You will breeze through it in
way.
a half a day. You'll breeze through it. It's very cinematic. It's good. I mean, what else?
It reads just like, I mean, like I said, there's no. It
there's
reads
very little dating in it. If
there's nothing that's stated in it.
But basically, the idea is that they kind of like, what if we sent someone to hell to Dante's version of Inferno, but we kind of update the sins for at that time present day, and then they wrote a sequel which didn't quite hit as well, but a similar concept, and we'd been talking about adapting that because I think it's a really cinematic book. And I was like, well, what if we combine these two? Like, what if we do, and another project that Ben, at some point, will have to share we could do an entire podcast on Ben's Ghostbusters 3 script, which I still think is fucking brilliant idea. But we're like, what if we let's do our Ghostbusters. Let's do a horror action movie with a lot of comedy, but instead of it, aging it that way, let's make it it was essentially Frat Boys Go to Hell. Like, that was no, I'm sorry, not even Frat Boys. They were older. It was The Hangover. It was these middle-aged do-nothings. And I went down to Pembroke Pines to see my brother for us to go watch Cabin in the Woods. And as we were driving to the theater, I just got this idea pop in my head, and I'm like, I'm about to send Ben a text message that he's going to think is like the worst idea on the planet. But it's going to be really funny.
Hell Week.
I'm like, what if we make them frat boys and we call it Hell Week? And Ben writes back, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I was like, it was one of those things where I was like, it's simultaneously like the most cliched and worst idea and also the most original. Like,
yeah.
Who has seen that before? Nobody. I have never heard of anything like that before. The idea of sending fraternity members to hell and
watching these people go through it, and that was our initial concept. And we took a long time on planning on that one as well. We started writing a little quicker, but mainly because we knew our first act. We knew exactly where it was going to start.
We've revised the first act so many times.
I was saying, at that point, we knew exactly where we wanted to start, and we knew where the second and third act, like, where that had to take place. We had a very basic outline going. And so we wrote a first act, and it just wasn't there. Like, it just, neither of us were, and we tried, like, we kept doing rewrites, we kept writing more towards this scene that made no sense, and we're like, it's not working, and and we kept having to answer more questions the more that we tried to flesh out that concept. Before we were like, maybe the problem isn't making the concept work, the problem is just the concept is broken. We need to update what we're going to do we know we need these people to wind up in hell. Let's figure out a more creative and interesting way to get these people to the kind of crux of the movie, and that's where we came up with our rewrite, which is, bar none, better than our original concept, and funnier and scarier, and just a lot of good fun stuff in it. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of our process really for that one. And the problem is that right now Hell Week has frozen over just for the time being.
Well, and like I said, that's my fault. Well, as much as it can be, it's my fault. It's because I shot my demon seed into my wife.
I did not say that. That was Ben talking. No, but it's cool, and sometimes though, getting away, like, one of the things I like is that we've now taken a long time post Dream Writers, which is another one of those concepts that we still haven't really fully, really fully addressed in total, about how we want to go through pitching again and that kind of stuff.
Oh, sure. I mean,
but who knows? We may come back to Dream Writers and have
this huge revelation,
which might makes it way, way better than what it was originally.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, we spent so long on Dream Writers. I mean, really, the time we've spent not on Dream Writers is actually still relatively minimal.
Yeah.
However, it feels like a lot more time has gone
by.
Done
a lot more in that time, though.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird spot to be at, but we're definitely, I think, one of the things, like I said, that one of the reasons why we're going to end up having more people on the podcast is so we can get back to actually doing some writing. Who knows? Maybe in my relatively impaired, sleep-deprived state, I can start writing something
write
decent.
Like the great. Maybe when you're in hell, you can write the greatest version of hell possible. Just in case any of you out there have actually enjoyed what you've listened to for the last hour, you can find samples of quite a bit of our writing actually on the site if you go to the scripts portion.
And really, as far as encapsulating, I think, some of the way that our process works and voice, I think really the shorts are a really good way to go because they're 7 to 11 pages long. You can read them in a couple of minutes. And you understand sort of our sensibilities, because a lot of that stuff was just stuff that we threw around and either entered into a contest or did whatever with.
For sure. And read the Dream Writers pilot.
Yeah,
read
the Dream Writers pilot is the ultimate thing. I'm just saying, if you only have 30 minutes.
And if you're a Walking Dead fan, for sure read Walking Dead in a Winter Wonderland, which is our 10-page short about a Christmas-themed Walking Dead episode that would take place sometime
between the
first and second season.
Yes.
Yeah, like around or mid-second season. Maybe.
Yeah. I think in between the break and the second season or whatever.
But it's good. I like it. Of all the things that we've worked on together, I probably reread that one the most. Ben does a very, very good job of encapsulating the voices of those characters, which is a really difficult thing to do. It's probably why at some point we'll have to. The hard part is that by the time we get around to a lot of it, some of the shows are going off the air. But one of the ways to break into TV writing that they talk a lot about is writing spec scripts. Which is something
I'm not a huge fan of it. I know that John Arthur is.
Yeah, it's kind of the process. But, you did a phenomenal job with Walking Dead. It's kind of just picking the right property. Most of the times the specs are written for, non-serialized shows, which is sort of a waste, in my opinion. Like, okay, you wrote a Law & Order episode. Well, congratulations, you looked up a court case and wrote the same episode
Right,
they've
exactly.
been doing for
Yeah.
25 years. So yeah, if you guys have any that's actually an interesting idea. Send us your suggestions for shows that you like, that you'd be interested in seeing a spec script written about, and maybe we will consider your thing. We can't do Breaking Bad because we could do a Better Call Saul episode.
Oh god.
Which would be fantastic. My little bit of advice from the personal side is team up with someone that is interested in this, in kind of the same. You definitely do not have to agree on everything. It's better if you don't.
Yeah.
But definitely someone that has kind of the same sensibility, that is not, neither side. Like I said, Ben does very much the heavy lifting on what we work on, and there's never I'm never upset. I'm more just thankful, because usually every time the pages that come back are good.
Well, here, let me actually end my point on a quick aside. Because obviously Matt and I are really good friends, and have become really good friends ever since we first met the first night you came to my Oscar party. One of the things I've noticed about having friends or working with friends is that one of the people I would consider one of my other best friends, who is the best man at my wedding, and really is, would be there if I really ever needed something. I'm sure I would give him a call. We see eye to eye on almost everything.
Paul Mamelito, for those of you out there.
Oh yeah,
very curious about the name.
This is Paul Mamelito.
Don't want to keep you in suspense that Kaiser Soze turns out to be Paul Mamelito.
Yes, exactly. It is Paul Mamelito. Paul Mamelito and I don't disagree. When we disagree poorly. It devolves into name calling and into throwing shit at one another and into screaming at one another and belittling and
getting personal,
getting very personal. And like I said, that's one of the things that you might say, oh yeah, it's the thing that sort of best friends do. One of the reasons why I feel like I've had such a symbiotic writing relationship with Matt is because, for some reason, and this is just inherent, I think, in our relationship, is that while you're as good of a friend as Paul is to me, we never disagree like that. When we disagree so adamantly, it's almost kind of like, well, I want to see where you're coming from here. Like, I really, and it's not in like a sort of like this morbid, like, oh, you're a fucking moron.
No,
you're
it's
thinking
like,
about it that way. It's like, I am so interested in how we are getting to these different points.
Yeah.
Which is, and so my only point in sharing that would be that if you're going to collaborate with somebody, it needs to be with somebody that when you disagree, it's almost, instead of being a point of contention, it's a point of like
fascination,
yeah. And being like, how the fuck did he get there?
And there's another very important part, and this is one that Ben and I will never admit to you on specific areas, or at least I won't, because my ego, as small as it is, at least big enough to do that. A lot of times, we'll sit and argue something, and we'll very much see the other person's point to the extent of agreeing with the other person's point. We are never going to admit
it's true.
that we necessarily agree.
We continue
on,
to play devil's advocate.
Well, we will still fight it, but like there'll be a part of me that's like, well, he's fucking right. That's kind of yeah. Christopher Nolan has like some problems with a lot of this exposition and these other things, but I still fucking love Christopher Nolan. No, he's wrong. Christopher Nolan is amazing. You can't do anything right. He's wrong. So yeah, that you said you already got into my head. Get out. So yeah, that is super super important, and it's not. I've written with other people, and I've kind of like collaborated ideas with other people. The other good thing is that Ben and I both push each other to keep things moving. Like right now we know, like we both kind of recognize we're at like this thing. So
we're in an impasse.
Yeah, we're at like we need to like get back on track and start writing again. So we will call the other one out for whichever one is which it's always both of us, but it's like how for whatever reason we've stopped on something. And it's happened most summers. We get a little lazy over the summer, and we don't really write. We meet every week like clockwork, and we just sit and drink and talk
about movies.
Movies that we watched like the last week, and then like fucking start laughing about ridiculous stuff. And that's fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. You just got to make sure that you kind of keep things going. Don't let it sit too long. Otherwise, you're probably not gonna get back to it if you don't keep it going. But anyway, we probably kept you guys on. This is how I tie up phone calls with my mom. Like, oh well, you probably got a lot to do tomorrow.
It's a weeknight.
Yeah. Hopefully, you guys found this interesting. I know I still to this day get interesting information that I don't know out of Ben, and hopefully you're able to keep up with some of the properties. But again, go to the website, go read Walking Dead in Winterland, go read Feeling a Little Spacey. Those are our two big shorts we have on there. Read the Dream Writers pilot, and you can also read if you love the Dream Writers pilot, which I will say the good thing is that I've shared that pilot with more of that work than any of our other stuff, and everybody gets to the end of it with 1,000 questions, and like, I want to know more.
That was the best thing. Is actually the guy who writes professionally was like, got halfway through it and sent me an email and said, the dialogue's really strong. I like the dialogue. Some of the stuff I'm a little cloudy on as far as what's going on. Some of the exposition's a little clunky. It feels kind of forced where it's going place to place. Anyways, other than that, it's pretty interesting. I'm going to keep reading it. And then the second email was like, what happens? Because he was like, and then he was like, what after? He was like, dude, after that teaser, that's a good teaser. That's like, I mean, he wanted to know he wanted to know where it went. At that point, he was like, honestly, still same thing. Some clunky shit in there. But it gets to the end, and you're like, what the fuck happened?
And that's a lot more than you can say for many pilots that come out nowadays that are, you have a lot of problems with. But at least we definitely have a good beginning and a good end. And a little known fact, that person that read the script, Charlie Kaufman, acclaimed screenwriter Charlie Kaufman.
Oh,
I mean, we can't say his name, but yeah, that's who read it, and was so impressed.
Charlie Kaufman. Charlie Kaufman is John Arthur Ingram's pseudonym.
It would be amazing. Create an entire character in real life. It's his greatest work ever. It's his own sim. All right, anyway, folks, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully, we'll have a mix of all kinds of podcasts for you.
We'll have some fun stuff coming up.
This one will definitely air this week, so you won't be in danger. But the next two, I have to kind of figure out when they're going to come up, so you may get some confusing. We're talking about things that haven't happened or talking about things that have happened, kind of things. But definitely go to the website, www.lastpintprod.com, facebook.com/lastpint, Twitter @lastpintprod, Google+, just... If you're really on Google Plus doing anything, please let me know, because my company still feels that people are interacting on there, and I don't believe
nobody is.
We thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Cheers.
Cheers.